50 passengers. 2 Unconscious pilots. 1 Teenage girl with only simulator experience. The plane was descending fast, and nobody knew how to land it. Then air traffic control called out a secret code name over the radio. A name that belonged to a legendary pilot from decades ago. A name that would give her the courage to save everyone. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Sarah Mitchell sat in seat 7B, staring out the airplane window as white clouds drifted past. She was 15 years old, traveling alone from Boston to Chicago to visit her aunt for spring break. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore jeans and a blue hoodie with her school's aviation club logo on the front. The flight attendants were doing their safety demonstration in the aisle, but Sarah barely noticed. She had memorized every word of the safety briefing years ago. She knew where every emergency exit was located, how the oxygen masks worked, and exactly what to do in case of an emergency landing on water. In her lap sat her tablet, but she wasn't watching movies or scrolling through social media like most teenagers. Instead, she was reading flight procedures and studying cockpit layouts. Sarah had been obsessed with flying since she was 10 years old, the first time her father had taken her up in a small plane and let her touch the controls. Her father was a commercial pilot with 20 years of experience, and he had taught her everything he could about aviation. Sarah's backpack under the seat in front of her was stuffed with flight manuals, aviation magazines, and printouts of Boeing 737 system diagrams. Her friends at school thought she was strange, spending all her free time studying airplanes instead of going to parties or hanging out at the mall. But Sarah didn't care. Flying was her passion, her dream, her entire future. Every weekend for 3 years, Sarah spent hours on professional flight simulators. She knew the Boeing 737 inside and out. She had practiced takeoffs, landings, and emergency procedures hundreds of times. Her father had also taken her up in small planes, letting her handle the controls. She had about 30 hours of real flight time. The flight attendant, Maria, walked down the aisle. "Would you like something to drink, sweetie?" "Just apple juice, please," Sarah said politely. "Traveling alone?" Maria asked. "Yes, going to visit my aunt in Chicago." The plane was about half full, maybe 50 passengers. In the rows ahead, Sarah could see different types of travelers. There was a businessman in an expensive suit, typing aggressively on his laptop, probably working on some important deal. A young mother struggled with a crying baby, trying desperately to calm the infant with a bottle. An elderly couple sat together, their wrinkled hands intertwined, wedding rings catching the overhead light. They looked peaceful, comfortable with each other after what was probably 50 years of marriage. Behind Sarah, a group of college students laughed and joked loudly, excited about their spring break trip. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man had already fallen asleep, his mouth hanging open slightly, a travel pillow wrapped around his neck. Sarah noticed all of them, filing away mental notes like her father had taught her. "As a pilot, you're responsible for every single person on your plane," he always said. "Never forget that each passenger is someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's loved one." Everything seemed completely normal. Just another routine Tuesday afternoon flight. The engines hummed steadily. The cabin was at a comfortable temperature. The flight attendants smiled and moved efficiently through their duties. Nothing suggested that in less than an hour, Sarah's entire life would change forever. 20 minutes into the flight, Sarah felt it. A slight change in the plane's movement. A small drop in altitude, then a correction. That wasn't normal for cruise altitude. She looked out the window. Clear sky, no turbulence. So why the altitude change? Then it happened again. Another drop, another correction. Sarah pressed the call button. Maria appeared, looking concerned. "I felt the plane drop twice," Sarah said quietly. "It's not normal. Is everything all right with the pilots?" Maria's smile faded. "I'm sure everything is fine. This wasn't turbulence," Sarah said. I know what turbulence feels like. This was different. Maria studied her face. How do you know about flying? My dad is a pilot. I've been studying aviation for years. Maria leaned closer. Stay calm. I need to check something. She walked quickly to the cockpit and disappeared inside. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. Other passengers started looking around nervously. When Maria emerged, her face was pale. She came straight to Sarah and knelt beside her seat. What's your name? Maria asked. Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah, the captain is sick. Very sick. He passed out, and we can't wake him. The co-pilot is also feeling ill. He thinks it's food poisoning. Maria took a breath. He asked if there are any pilots on board. There aren't any. But you said you study aviation. Sarah's heart began to pound. You want me to help? The co-pilot isn't sure he can land safely. He's getting dizzy and weak. Maria grabbed Sarah's hand. If he passes out too. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. I'm not a real pilot. I've only flown small planes with my dad. I've never flown a commercial jet. But you know about flying, right? Yes, but knowing and doing are different things. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Right now, you might be our only chance. Sarah looked around the cabin. All these people, the businessmen, the mother with her baby, the elderly couple, all trusting that everything would be okay. She thought about her father. What would he do? Okay, Sarah whispered. I'll do whatever I can. Maria led Sarah to the cockpit. Captain Reynolds was unconscious in his seat, his face gray. The co-pilot, David Chen, was gripping the controls, covered in sweat. This is Sarah, Maria said. Her father is a pilot. She has simulator training. David looked at Sarah. How old are you? 15. Have you ever flown a jet? No, sir, only small planes. But I've done hundreds of hours on Boeing 737 simulators. David closed his eyes. Simulators aren't real life. I know. The radio crackled. Flight 392, what's your situation? David grabbed the radio. Boston Center, co-pilot severely impaired. We have a passenger with flight training. She's 15 with simulator experience on 737s. Long pause. Then, Flight 392, understood. We're getting a retired captain on the line. Stand by. David looked at Sarah. Sit in the captain's seat. I'll stay here as long as I can, but you need to be ready. Sarah's legs shook as she moved to the seat. Maria helped move Captain Reynolds back so Sarah could slide in. Suddenly Sarah was surrounded by instruments, switches, and controls. She had seen this in simulators, but now it was real. Sarah, David said weakly. Take a deep breath. Sarah breathed in, then out. The autopilot is on. The plane is flying itself. Just observe for now. The radio came alive. Flight 392, this is Captain Robert Hayes. I flew 737s for 30 years. I'm here to help. Who am I speaking with? First Officer Chen. I'm barely conscious. The passenger flying is Sarah Mitchell, 15 years old. Sarah, can you hear me? His voice was calm and steady. Sarah put on the headset. Yes, sir. Tell me about your training. Sarah swallowed. 5 years studying aviation. Over 400 hours on professional 737 simulators. I know the systems and procedures. About 30 hours real flight time in small planes. That's good, Sarah. Better than I expected. Now, what's your current situation? We're about 40 minutes from Boston. Weather is clear. Captain is unconscious. Co-pilot is fading. Understood. We're going to get you to Boston, Logan. The autopilot is flying now, which is good. Your job is to monitor and be ready to take control. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Good. Now scan the instruments. Tell me what you see. Sarah looked at the screens. Altitude 35,000 feet, airspeed 450 knots, heading 090. Autopilot engaged. Engines normal. Fuel 60%. Perfect. You're reading correctly. David suddenly groaned and slumped forward. The co-pilot just passed out, Sarah said, panic rising. Stay calm, Sarah, Captain Hayes said firmly. The autopilot is still flying. You're okay. Check that David is breathing. Sarah felt for a pulse. He's breathing. Pulse is weak. Good. Maria, get both pilots to the cabin. Give them oxygen. Maria and another attendant moved the unconscious pilots out. Sarah was alone now. Completely alone. 50 people depending on her. Sarah, Captain Hayes said. Look at me as your co-pilot. I'm here with you. You're not alone. Okay, Sarah whispered. Just watch the autopilot. It's doing the work. You're supervising. Sarah focused on the instruments. The plane flew smoothly. Everything looked normal. I'm okay, she said, stronger now. I can do this. I know you can. Now let's prepare for landing. For 20 minutes, Captain Hayes walked Sarah through every system. Fuel, hydraulics, electrical. Sarah was amazed at how much she knew. The simulator training had prepared her. You're doing great, Hayes said. Now we need to talk about landing. That's the hardest part. I've practiced many times in simulators. Real life is different. The plane will feel heavier. But the basics are the same. Do you remember the landing checklist? Sarah closed her eyes. Descend to pattern altitude. Configure with flaps and gear. Align with runway. Maintain speed. Flare before touchdown. Apply brakes. Perfect. Boston Logan has runway 4 are available. 11,000 feet long, plenty of room. Weather is clear with light winds. Ideal conditions. Okay, Sarah said, hands shaking again. Sarah, you know what makes the difference between success and failure? Not panicking. Stay calm and follow procedures. You're already showing me you can do that. What do I do first? We'll start your descent. Find the altitude selector on the autopilot panel. Sarah found it. I see it. Turn it to 25,000 feet. Slowly. Sarah turned the dial. The plane began descending. Perfect. Now contact Boston Tower. Say exactly this, Boston Tower, this is Flight 392. Emergency aircraft inbound. Student pilot at controls, requesting priority landing runway 4R. Sarah pressed the radio button. Her voice was stronger than expected. Boston Tower, this is Flight 392. Emergency aircraft inbound. Student pilot at controls, requesting priority landing runway 4R. Flight 392, Boston Tower, cleared for priority approach, emergency vehicle standing by, wind 040 at 5 knots, cleared to descend to 3,000 feet. Say, Roger, Boston Tower. Descending to 3,000. Sarah repeated it. The controller acknowledged. Now we wait while you descend. Scan your instruments every few seconds. Check altitude, speed, heading. Sarah watched everything carefully. The plane descended steadily. Maria appeared. The pilots are stable. How are you? Managing, Sarah said. We're preparing to land. Flight 392, descend to 5,000 feet, the tower said. Sarah adjusted the altitude selector. At 5,000 feet, Captain Hayes spoke. Now we configure for landing. First, slow down. You're too fast to land. See the speed selector? Yes, sir. Change it to 200 knots. Sarah adjusted it. The engines reduced power. The plane slowed. Now extend the flaps. See the flap lever between the seats? Sarah saw it. Settings marked, 0, 1, 5, 15, 30, 40. I see it. Move it to flaps 5. Sarah moved the lever. Mechanical sounds. The plane's nose dipped, then stabilized. Flaps at 5, she reported. Perfect. At 3,000 feet, we'll extend landing gear. Sarah watched the altitude drop. 4,000.3,500.3,000. Flight 392, turn left heading 040, the tower said. Sarah adjusted the heading. The plane banked left. Now extend the landing gear. Find the gear lever on your right, near your knee. Sarah found it. I see it. When you move it down, you'll hear a loud sound. Don't be alarmed. After a few seconds, 3 green lights will appear. Sarah pulled the lever down. Loud grinding sounds filled the cockpit. Her heart jumped, but she stayed calm. 3 green lights appeared. 3 green lights. Gear down and locked. Excellent. Set flaps to 15. Sarah moved the lever. More sounds. The plane slowed further. Flight 392, you are 10 miles from runway. Descend to 2,000 feet. Reduce speed to 160 knots. Sarah made the adjustments. Sarah, Captain Hayes said seriously. In 5 minutes, you'll take manual control. The autopilot gets you close, but you fly the final approach. Are you ready? Sarah's mouth went dry. I think so. You need to be sure. Sarah thought about her father. About all those simulator hours, about the 50 people behind her. I'm ready. Good. Here's what happens. You'll see the runway soon. Tower will clear you to land. Then press the autopilot disconnect button on the yoke. After that, you're flying manually. Sarah looked at the yoke. She saw the button. You'll use the yoke to control pitch and roll. Pull back to climb, push forward to descend. Turn left or right to bank. The most important thing is maintaining speed and descent rate. About 700 feet per minute. 140 knots until close to the runway, then 130 for touchdown. Flight 392, 5 miles from runway. You are cleared to land. This was it. Sarah, Captain Hayes said. Take the controls now. Press the autopilot disconnect button. Sarah's hand shook as she pressed it. Immediately, she felt the plane's weight in her hands. The yoke had resistance. The plane was hers now. I have control, she whispered. Don't make sudden movements. The plane is lined up with the runway. Just maintain course and descend gradually. Do you see the runway? Sarah looked out. In the distance, 2 gray strips. The runway. I see it. Good. Start your descent. Very gently, push the yoke forward a tiny bit. You want 700 feet per minute descent rate. Watch your vertical speed indicator. Sarah pushed forward slightly. The nose dipped. The indicator showed -700. Perfect. Hold that rate. Keep eyes on the runway. The runway grew bigger. Sarah could see white markings now. Her heart pounded. Check your altitude, Hayes said. 1,500 feet. Check speed. 140 knots. Perfect. Set flaps to 30. Sarah moved the flap lever to 30. The plane slowed and pitched down. She adjusted with a gentle pull. Beautiful correction. You have natural instincts. At 50 feet, I'll tell you to flare. That means pull back gently to raise the nose. This slows your descent for smooth touchdown. But not yet. The runway rushed closer. Sarah could see emergency vehicles with flashing lights. 1,000 feet. Set flaps to 40. Full flaps. Sarah moved the lever to 40. Speed dropped to 130 knots. Maintain that speed. 500 feet. The ground was so close. Individual people visible near the runway. 300 feet. Line looks good. Sarah's hands locked on the yoke. Every muscle tense. 200 feet. The runway right in front of her. Numbers painted on it, 4R. 100 feet. Get ready to flare. Sarah held her breath. 50 feet. Flare now. Pull back gently. Sarah pulled back on the yoke. The nose came up. The descent slowed. Hold it, hold it. The main wheels touched with a gentle thump. Then the nose wheel. They were on the ground. Brakes. Press the tops of the rudder pedals. Sarah pressed down. The brakes engaged. The plane began slowing. Keep it straight. The plane rolled down the runway, slowing, slowing. Finally, it stopped about halfway down. Flight 392, you're down. Emergency vehicles approaching, outstanding job. Sarah sat frozen, hands still gripping the yoke. Then suddenly, all the fear came flooding out. She started crying. Maria rushed in and hugged her. You did it. Oh my God, you did it. The next hours were a blur. Paramedics checked Sarah. The pilots were rushed to the hospital with severe food poisoning. Both would recover fully. Sarah was taken to a private room where officials wanted to talk. But first, they let her call her parents. Sarah? Are you okay? We saw the news, her father answered. Dad, her voice broke. I had to land the plane. What? Through tears, Sarah told him everything. When she finished, her father was quiet. Then she heard him crying. Dad? I'm so proud of you. You stayed calm and saved lives. I was so scared. Being scared is okay. But you didn't let fear stop you. That's what makes you a real pilot. Officials came next with questions. Sarah answered everything, still numb. An FAA woman said, what you did was technically illegal. But given the circumstances, no penalties. In fact, we want to fast-track your pilot training. You could have your commercial license in a few years. The airline's CEO came personally. You saved 50 lives today. This airline will sponsor your full flight training. Everything. When you're ready, you'll have a job with us. The passengers came to thank her one by one. The businessman hugged her and cried. The mother kissed her forehead. The elderly couple held her hands. Late that night, Sarah lay in a hotel bed, replaying everything. The fear, the weight of controls. The moment the wheels touched down. Her phone buzzed. A text from Captain Hayes, you have a gift, Sarah. Don't waste it. The sky is waiting for you. Sarah smiled and looked out at the night sky, at the distant lights of airplanes. She had always dreamed of being a pilot. Now she knew it was what she was meant to do. A week later, after the media frenzy had started to calm down and Sarah could finally think clearly again, Captain Hayes called her personally. His voice on the phone was warm and grandfatherly. He asked Sarah to meet him at a small private airport outside Boston. He said there was something important he needed to tell her, something he couldn't explain over the phone. When she arrived with her father the next morning, Hayes was waiting beside a small Cessna 172. He was in his 70s, with white hair, deep laugh lines around his eyes, and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of flying in all kinds of conditions. He had kind eyes that reminded Sarah of her grandfather. "Sarah," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I wanted to meet you in person." To see the young woman who kept her head when experienced pilots would have panicked. "Thank you for helping me, Captain Hayes," Sarah said sincerely. "I couldn't have done it without you talking me through everything. You saved my life. You saved everyone's lives. You did all the hard work, Sarah. I just reminded you of what you already knew. Your training, your instincts, your courage, that all came from inside you." He smiled warmly. "But there's something I need to tell you. Something I didn't mention during the emergency because you needed to stay focused on flying." He led her into a small office at the airport. The walls were covered with aviation memorabilia, photos of various aircraft, and pictures of pilots from different eras. On the wall were photos of aircraft and pilots. Hayes pointed to one particular photograph showing a younger version of himself standing next to a woman in a flight suit. She had dark hair, a confident smile, and was standing in front of a rescue helicopter with Air National Guard painted on the side. "That's me 30 years ago," he said, pointing to his younger self. "And that woman was one of the best pilots I ever knew in my entire career. Her name was Rebecca Mitchell." Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Mitchell? That's my last name." Captain Hayes nodded slowly, watching her face. "Rebecca was your grandmother, Sarah. Your father's mother. I flew with her on several rescue missions back in the 80s. Sarah stared. Her grandmother had died when Sarah was a baby. She never knew her. Your grandmother was a rescue pilot. She flew helicopters in dangerous conditions, saving people from mountains and disasters. She was fearless and incredibly skilled. Her call sign was Shadow 7. Because she could fly in conditions where others couldn't even see." Sarah's father stepped forward, eyes wet. "I never told Sarah much about her. It was too painful. She died in a crash when Sarah was 6 months old, rescuing hikers from a storm." Hayes put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. "When I heard your name on the radio, I looked you up. I saw your father was Mark Mitchell, and I knew you were Rebecca's granddaughter. That's why I called you what I did." "What do you mean? Do you remember what I called you on the radio?" Sarah thought back. "You said, 'Good girl.' But later, you said, 'You're doing great, Shadow 7. Hayes nodded. "I called you by your grandmother's call sign. I wanted her spirit with you in that cockpit. I wanted you to know her courage flows through you." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "I didn't even notice. You were focused on flying, which is exactly right. But Sarah, I want you to have something." He pulled out a flight jacket. Worn and faded, with patches from rescue organizations. On the chest, Mitchell. Below it, a patch with a shadow and the number 7. "This was your grandmother's jacket. Your father gave it to me years ago. I think it's time it went to you." Sarah took the jacket with trembling hands. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," Hayes said. "You have her gift. Her calm under pressure, her instinct." Sarah's father pulled her into a hug. "He's right. You're exactly like her." The months that followed were surreal. Sarah became famous. Her story was everywhere. She received awards from aviation organizations. But Sarah stayed grounded. She finished high school. Her friends treated her differently now, which was hard. The airline kept its promise. They enrolled Sarah in accelerated flight training. Every weekend and summer, she worked toward her licenses. Her instructor was amazed. You fly like someone with thousands of hours. I've never seen anyone progress this fast. Sarah always wore her grandmother's flight jacket during training. It was her connection to the legacy she carried. On her 18th birthday, Sarah earned her commercial pilot license. The ceremony was attended by Flight 392 survivors, including Maria. Captain Reynolds and First Officer Chen, both recovered, were there. You saved our lives, Reynolds said. Now we watch you begin your career. It's an honor. The airline offered Sarah a first officer position on regional jets. Unprecedented for someone so young, but after what she proved, no one questioned it. On her first official flight, Sarah sat in the right seat. The captain beside her was a veteran with 20 years' experience. He looked at her with respect. Ready for this, Shadow 7? He asked with a smile. Sarah smiled back. The call sign had stuck. Other pilots heard the story, heard what Hayes called her. Now it was official. Her call sign was Shadow 7, just like her grandmother's. Ready, sir. As they taxied to the runway, Sarah felt calm wash over her. This was where she belonged. In a cockpit, in the sky, carrying on her grandmother's legacy. The tower cleared them for takeoff. They accelerated down the runway. As the nose lifted and ground fell away, Sarah looked at the endless sky ahead. She thought about that day when she was 15, sitting in seat 7B. The moment Maria asked for help. The moment she said yes. That one decision had changed everything. It revealed who she truly was. It connected her to her grandmother. It gave her purpose. 5 years later, Sarah was a captain, flying Boeing 737s. At 23, she was the youngest captain in company history. She had thousands of hours and the respect of every pilot she worked with. One Tuesday afternoon, Sarah prepared for a flight from Boston to Chicago. The same route from that day. As passengers boarded, Sarah walked through the cabin. When she reached row 7, she stopped. A teenage girl sat in 7B, wearing headphones and reading a flight manual. Interested in aviation? Sarah asked. The girl looked up, startled. About 15, with nervous eyes and a shy smile. Yes, ma'am. I want to be a pilot someday. That's wonderful. What's your name? Emma. I'm Captain Mitchell. I'm flying today. Would you like to see the cockpit before takeoff? Emma's eyes went wide. Really? For future pilots, absolutely. Sarah led Emma to the cockpit. Emma stood there, taking in all the instruments with wonder. How long have you been a pilot? Emma asked. 8 years total. Officially, 5 years. You look so young to be a captain. Sarah smiled. I had good teachers. And I had a moment that changed everything. What moment? Sarah decided to tell her. When I was 15, about your age, I was sitting in seat 7B on this exact route. The pilots got sick, and I had to land the plane. Emma's mouth fell open. Wait, you're that Sarah Mitchell? The girl who saved Flight 392. We studied your landing in aviation class. That's me. Oh my God. You're a legend. Sarah felt awkward. I just did what needed to be done. But Emma, I want to tell you something. That day, I was terrified. My hands were shaking. I didn't feel brave. I just knew that if I didn't try, people would die. How did you stay calm? My grandmother was a pilot. I never met her, but she had a saying, fear is okay. Panic is not. Feel the fear, then do what needs to be done anyway. Emma nodded, absorbing this. Do you practice on simulators? Sarah asked. Yes. Every weekend, maybe 100 hours so far. Keep doing that. Simulators saved my life and 50 others. When the real moment came, I knew what to do because I practiced. A flight attendant appeared. Captain, ready for pushback. Thank you. Sarah turned to Emma. I need to work now. But Emma, if you love flying, if you feel it in your bones, don't let anyone tell you you're too young or not good enough. Trust yourself. When your moment comes, and it will, you'll be ready. Emma's eyes shined. Thank you, Captain Mitchell. Call me Shadow 7, Sarah said with a wink. Sarah returned to the cockpit. As she went through pre-flight, she thought about how strange life could be. 8 years ago, she was that nervous girl in row 7. Now she was the captain, inspiring the next generation. The flight was smooth. When they landed in Chicago, Sarah made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mitchell. Before you leave, I want to share something. 8 years ago, I was a passenger on this exact route. The pilots became ill, and I had to land the plane. Today, I'm honored to fly this route as your captain. It reminds me that life takes unexpected turns, and sometimes the scariest moments become the most important ones. You never know what you're capable of until you're tested. As passengers left, many stopped to thank Sarah. Emma was one of the last. She handed Sarah a paper. This is my email. If it's okay, could you give me advice sometimes? Sarah smiled. I'd be happy to. Keep studying, keep practicing, never give up. I won't. Thank you, Shadow 7. After Emma left, Sarah sat alone in the cockpit. She pulled out a small photo from her flight bag. Her grandmother standing beside a helicopter, wearing the flight jacket, looking confident and strong. I hope I'm making you proud, Grandma, Sarah whispered. She felt a sense of warmth, of approval, of connection across time. Her grandmother's spirit was with her, just as it had been that day when she was 15. Sarah put the photo away and prepared for her next flight. There would be thousands more in her career. Routine flights and emergencies. Calm skies and storms. But she would face them all with the courage her grandmother showed, the courage she discovered in herself that day in row 7. 10 years had passed since that fateful day. Sarah was now 33 years old and had become one of the most respected pilots in the airline industry. She had been featured in aviation magazines, spoken at countless safety conferences, and trained hundreds of new pilots. But what she was most proud of was the scholarship fund she had created in her grandmother's name. The Shadow 7 Foundation provided full flight training scholarships to young people who couldn't afford aviation school. Every year, 10 students received complete funding for their pilot licenses, from private pilot all the way through commercial certification. Emma had been the foundation's first scholarship recipient, and she was now a captain herself, flying international routes. On the 20th anniversary of Flight 392's emergency landing, the airline organized a reunion. Sarah stood in a conference room surrounded by familiar faces. Maria, now in her 50s and retired, hugged her tightly. Captain Reynolds and First Officer Chen, both long retired, stood together sharing stories. The businessman from row 8 had become a major donor to the Shadow 7 Foundation. The mother with the baby brought her daughter, now a young woman studying aerospace engineering. I want to thank you all for being here, Sarah said, addressing the room. 20 years ago, we shared an experience that none of us will ever forget. But what I've learned since then is that the real miracle wasn't just the landing. It was what came after. The connections we made, the lives we changed, the legacy we're building together. She looked around at all the faces, some lined with age now, but all smiling with warmth and gratitude. That scared 15-year-old girl in seat 7B never imagined she'd be standing here today. But she learned something important that day: we're all capable of more than we think. When life calls us to do something extraordinary, we have a choice. We can let fear paralyze us, or we can take a deep breath, trust our training, and take the controls. Sarah paused, her voice growing emotional. My grandmother never got to see me become a pilot. She never knew that her legacy would live on through me. But I feel her with me every single day, every single flight. And now, through our foundation, her legacy lives on through dozens of young pilots who are reaching for the sky. The room erupted in applause. People stood, some crying, all grateful to be part of this incredible story that continued to unfold. Later that evening, Sarah drove to a small cemetery outside Boston. She walked through the rows of headstones until she found the one she was looking for, Rebecca, Shadow 7, Mitchell, 1945 to 2000. Beloved mother, grandmother, and pilot. Sarah placed a bouquet of flowers at the base of the headstone and sat down on the grass beside it. "Hey, Grandma," she said softly. "It's been 20 years since the day that changed everything. 20 years since Captain Hayes called me by your name and gave me the courage to do what seemed impossible." A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, and Sarah smiled. "I just want you to know that I'm still flying. Still carrying your name, your call sign, your legacy. And I'm not alone anymore. There are dozens of us now, all inspired by your courage, all reaching for the sky just like you did." Sarah stood up, brushed off her uniform, and saluted the headstone. "Thank you for the gift of flight, Grandma. Thank you for showing me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and flying anyway." As Sarah walked back to her car, she looked up at the evening sky. A plane flew overhead, its lights blinking in the twilight. She smiled, knowing that somewhere up there, her grandmother was flying too. The girl from row 7 had become Captain Shadow 7. And the legacy would continue, carried forward by every pilot who learned that the sky has no limits for those brave enough to reach for it.